Hi everyone, and welcome back to another update on the Blackwood Engage layout. So something a little bit different this month. I'm going to do an unboxing and a review of the EFE Class 17 Clayton. Purchased this a couple of weeks ago. So we'll do an unboxing and we'll see what the actual loco is like. Update on the shed move. The work is all been completed in terms of obviously the base slab, which I think you'll have seen in the earlier videos. The electricity cable has been laid in. It's obviously not connected, but it is now all laid in, and I am now obviously just waiting to see whether or not the building will in actual fact appear next month, because we are now obviously into November, so the building is due to appear at the start of December, so not long to go. But obviously with the ever-changing situation with COVID-19, there could be a delay, so we'll just have to wait and see. So as I say, let's get on with this video and let's have a look at the Clayton Class 17. So first of all, EFE rail. So who are EFE rail? Because it's obviously a relatively new name. I think we're all used to, in Engage, we're all used to Dapol and Graham Farish. But obviously EFE rail is if you like, the new comer on the block, new kid in the block. So on the back of the actual box there is actually some information which tells you, first of all, that EFE stands for Exclusive First Editions, and it is in actual fact an offshoot of Bachmann. So the same company that obviously produced Graham Farish are actually producing EFE rail. The other thing on the back, you'll notice that it does say distributed on behalf of Kernel Model Rail Centre. My understanding is that Kernel Model Rail Centre, I think they commissioned the build of this particular type of locomotive, but Bachmann through EFE rail are obviously going to distribute it. It will give a much wider, if you like, audience than possibly Kernel could do. The actual box itself, it is actually very well packaged. The colour scheme they've used is quite striking. It does stand out. It doesn't look as though they've just thrown a bit of cardboard round the plastic jewel case that's obviously inside. They've obviously had a bit of thought about producing something that looks quite classy. So let's take the sleeve off and put that to one side. Obviously the locomotive's in the jewel case, we'll look at that in a minute. As usual, you will get a set of instructions. On the back it's an exploded diagram of the actual locomotive. Inside there's obviously the warranty down here, and on this side here there are some black and white photographs telling you how to put the decoder in. The actual locomotive, it comes with the, or it's ready for the next 18 DCC decoder. And although I don't have a DCC layout, it does look, they've given a bit of thought here. The actual access to put the decoder in, you don't really need to remove the loco shell, the body. You actually just simply unclip, I think it's the battery boxes that are slung between the two bogies, and that allows you to get in to fit the decoder. On the front, it's the usual running in instructions, and obviously, like most models these days, you get an extra bag with buffer beam details. So there's obviously instructions there where to fit the buffer beam details. Okay, we'll put that to one side and we'll open the box. Obviously, as you can see, that's the small bag with obviously snow ploughs and other bits and pieces there. And then we obviously have the actual locomotive itself. So let's remove that carefully out the box. Put that to one side. Remove this. It's well packaged, I will say that. Put that to one side. And there is the locomotive. If I can zoom in a little bit, hopefully you can see that, pick it up. So this is the weathered version. As you can see, it's numbered D8507. So a little bit of history about the actual locomotive number D8507. So firstly, the locomotive in real life, it was built back in October 1962, and it was originally allocated to the Palmadie depot in Glasgow. It only spent probably around 5 years there before it moved to the depot down at Carlisle Kingmoor. It only lasted there for a year and then went to Preston in 1968. And in October 68, the locomotive was actually withdrawn. So essentially, 6 years after it was built, it was withdrawn. However, it was reinstated back to Haymarket Depot in November 1969, and then it was transferred back to Palmadie in December 1971. And it was eventually withdrawn in 1971 when it had been reallocated back to Palmadie. The locomotive itself, it was condemned and was broken up by R.A. King's in Norwich. Now, from the information I have, or have been able to find out, it was scrapped in 1975, so it was withdrawn at the very end of December 1971, and then it was withdrawn, or scrapped rather, in 1975 and cut up, as I said, down in Norwich. So these are obviously known as Claytons, so they're class 17s. They're known as Claytons because Clayton was the company that obviously built these locomotives. They weren't all built by Clayton. Some of them were built by Bayer Peacock, but this one here was, I understand, built by Clayton Equipment Company in Derby. It had two Paxman 6-cylinder horizontal engines, which made it actually very, very unreliable. This locomotive was probably the most unreliable locomotive that British Rail ever had. Hence the reason the class really never survived for a very long time. The locomotive in real life only had an availability percentage of around 60, so just over half the time it was available for work, and half the time it was laid up because obviously the engines weren't reliable. So that's just a little bit of potted history about this actual locomotive and the class in general. The actual locomotive, which is obviously what you're more interested in, as you can see, it's a weathered version. One end, the head code is 9A02, and if we turn around the other end, you'll see the head code is 3 dots and just the number 9. There are separate wire handrails, obviously just at the ends of the front end of the locomotives, and I'm not sure if you can pick this out, but there do appear to be almost separate wire handrails actually going up on the recessed cab doors. Again, you can probably just pick it out there in the video. They do appear to have separate or exceptionally finely moulded windscreen wipers put onto obviously the windows of the locomotive at both ends. So again, the detail underneath, the bogies, etc., exceptionally well detailed. I'm not an expert, but it looks pretty good to me. there's obviously the battery box, fuel tanks, etc., which are slung underneath between the two bogies, which you would obviously remove to get into the to put in a decoder, etc. As you can see, the top of it's pretty plain. There's obviously grills at either end for the engine compartments. All the engine compartments doors are pretty well picked out, and obviously it's got the yellow warning panels. So overall, I mean, I'm not an expert, but just looking at the locomotive, just looking at the model, it does look pretty smart. The loco is obviously a little bit probably too early for Blackwood N-gauge layout. Obviously most of the locos I have are probably dating from the mid to late 70s onwards, although this locomotive here, as I say, it was still technically around in 1975 because that's when it gets scrapped, but they really came out of service probably in the very early 1970s. But that being said, it's still a really nice loco. Now, I had originally wanted to get this loco in the Ribble cement livery, but I couldn't source it anywhere. The model shop that I purchased this in told me that this is probably the best selling N-gauge locomotive they have ever had. They said they could have sold these locomotives 10 times over. So I think that's probably testament to possibly how popular they actually are. So my understanding is there is actually only one of these locomotives in preservation. I don't know where it's held and what line holds it. Maybe somebody could tell me in the comments at the side of the or below the video. But that's my understanding. There's actually only one of these locomotives. Only one is in preservation. So without further ado, I think what we'll do is we'll get this onto the layout and let's see it running around Blackwood N-gauge and see how it performs. So I've run the Clayton for around about half an hour, and let's have a look at it coming through the bridge here. I've slowed it down. It's pulling a short rake of 16-ton coal wagons, and as you can see, it really is working pretty well at slow speed. We'll just watch the locomotive coming through the point work here, see how it performs at a relatively low speed. The diamond crossing is actually the only initial frog point in the whole layout, and it's actually going to cross that without any problem at all. So yeah, see if I can track the locomotive as we go through. Really nice looking loco, I have to say. I am very impressed by this, EFE locomotive as it disappears away round again, going over more complicated point work. Looking really good. And it disappears away into the background. So I'll pick it up again, running down the back of the layout. This isn't a section of the layout that you see all that often, principally because it's quite difficult to try and film it. So here it comes round the back end of the layout. It's performing really well at low speed, really well. So that is the EFE Class 17. That's the unboxing of it. I've run it on the layout. What's my impression of it? Yeah, a very good locomotive. Runs well at low speed. I think it would be an asset to any layout, probably modelling in the late 60s, early 70s. You could probably get away with it. I think it was about when the end of steam was taking place. So yeah, if you're modelling a specific era around about the end of the 60s, early 70s, then that locomotive would be absolutely fine for you. Obviously EFE produce it in a number of liveries. Obviously I had been looking for the Ribble cement livery, which is obviously quite modern, but it comes obviously in various different guises, with obviously the different BR emblems, especially if it's in the BR green. So if I was scoring this out of 10, I would certainly probably give this probably a 9 out of 10. I'm not an expert, but that would be my score. I would say it's worthy of a 9 out of 10, and I would recommend that you buy it. And I think the fact that the model shop that I got it in did say that they could have sold these locomotives 10 times over is probably testament to the fact that they are popular, and they are probably quite a reliable model to actually have on your layout. So that wraps up a slightly different update this month. As I say, not any real running session apart from obviously the Clayton that's been chuntering around in the background. But I will hopefully catch you all soon, and there are plenty of other Engage channels out there with excellent layouts, which I've actually added on in my own YouTube channel. I've put in some of the sort of most popular Engage channels, so if you want to take a look at that, you can find the channel. And any channels that I have not put on, because no doubt I'll have forgotten someday, if you want to email me, I'm more than happy to put your channel on my own YouTube channel to give it a bit of publicity. So that's it. So thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, please like, subscribe, etc. And I'll catch you all soon. Thanks, bye.